Story 1. The Vanishing Neighborhood. After 15 long years, I finally decided to return to the town where I grew up. Not for any particular reason, but out of a strange longing that had taken root in me over the past few months. Nostalgia, maybe. Or something deeper. My job had burned me out. My relationships had grown thin. And I needed something to ground me again. So I packed my bags, fueled my car, and drove 400 miles to the one place that had once felt like home. As I passed the familiar state sign and entered my old county, memories began flooding back. Riding bikes down sunlit streets, fireflies in glass jars, my mother calling me in for dinner just as the sky turned pink. I smiled to myself. Everything felt so close again, like I could touch the past if I reached out far enough. Eventually, I reached the turnoff for what I swore was our neighborhood, Maple Lane. I slowed down, eyes scanning for the familiar markers. I remembered this road so well. Tall oak trees lining both sides, a little red mailbox on the left corner with the number 174 in white paint, and across from it, the white wooden church with the rusted bell tower. But what I saw instead stopped me cold. There were no trees, just a wide, open field stretching into the horizon. No mailbox, no church, no paved road even. Just rough grassland and a few broken fence posts scattered across the landscape. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. Maybe I had taken the wrong turn. I checked my phone's GPS again. Nope. The pin was right there. This was the location. This was where our house had stood, where I had celebrated birthdays, scraped my knees, buried my childhood dog in the backyard. But there was nothing, not a trace, not even an indentation in the soil where a foundation might have been. It was as if the land had never been touched by human hands. I got out of the car slowly, stepping into the tall grass. The wind was still. The air smelled off, not like farmland or nature, more like emptiness. I wandered around in a daze, trying to align the landscape with my memories. Maybe the land had been cleared, redeveloped, but even then, there would have been signs, construction debris, new structures, a road at least. But here, the land looked ancient and undisturbed, like nothing had ever existed here. Eventually, I got back into my car and drove into town, which thankfully still existed, though it felt quieter, older. I found a small diner on Main Street that looked like it hadn't changed in decades. I stepped inside, sat at the counter, and ordered a coffee. An old man, likely in his 70s, was reading a newspaper at the end of the counter. Something about him felt familiar, so I took a chance. "Excuse me, sir," I said. "Do you know what happened to the neighborhood just off County Road 6? Maple Lane?" He looked up slowly. "Maple Lane? Yeah. There used to be a church across from a few houses. My family lived in the white one, number 174. He squinted at me like I'd asked him if there were castles in the sky. "Son," he said slowly, "there's never been a Maple Lane around here. And that patch of land by County Road 6, that's just been empty pasture since I was a kid. Ain't never been no homes built there. You must be mistaken us for some other town." I stared at him, unable to form words. "No," I whispered. "I grew up there." But the way he looked at me, with polite confusion and a tinge of concern, told me he believed what he said. I finished my coffee in silence, my thoughts unraveling with every sip. Had my memory betrayed me? Had I fabricated an entire house, street, and life? Or had something else happened? Story 2. The wrong photograph. That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the hotel room felt heavier than it should have, as if the air itself was pressing down on me. My mind kept circling back to the old man's words at the diner. There's never been any homes built on that land. He hadn't been dismissive. He hadn't been senile. He was certain. And that certainty chilled me more than if he'd just said, "I don't remember." I needed something real, something I could hold. So I pulled out the old leather-bound photo album I brought along, one I hadn't opened in years. I kept it sealed in a Ziploc bag to protect it from moisture. Inside were dozens of photos from my childhood, most of them taken by my mother, who was always meticulous about organizing and labeling everything. Flipping through the pages brought a wave of warmth at first. Halloween costumes, school plays, vacations by the lake. Then I found it, the photo I'd been searching for. My 9th birthday. There I was, smiling proudly in a red paper crown, standing on the front lawn of our white house. Behind me stood my parents, my father's hand on my shoulder, my mother holding a tray with the cake that read, "Happy 9th, Jamie," in crooked icing. And in the background, as clear as day, was our house. 2 stories, white wood siding, the porch swing, the crooked rose bush my dad refused to cut down. Even the red mailbox on the corner peeked in from the left of the frame. I smiled for the first time that day. Proof I wasn't crazy. I had lived there. The house had existed. Maple Lane was real. I closed the album, tucked it under my arm, and went down to the hotel's front desk. The receptionist was still there, a kindly woman in her 60s, glasses perched on her nose, flipping through a crossword puzzle. She looked up and smiled. "Back already?" she asked. "I was wondering," I said, carefully pulling the photo from the sleeve and sliding it across the counter. "Do you recognize this house?" She adjusted her glasses and leaned in, studying the photo. After a few moments, her brow furrowed. "That's strange," she murmured. "What is?" I asked, my voice tight. She tapped the photo gently. "That house looks like it should be on Maple Lane. But we've never had a Maple Lane here. And I've lived in this town my whole life. If there was a street like that, I'd know." I forced a laugh, uneasy. "Flip it over." She did. Written in my mother's familiar, looping handwriting were the words, "Jamie's 9th birthday, Maple Lane." She handed it back to me carefully, like it was something radioactive. "You sure this photo was taken here?" she asked. "Positive. That's me. That's my house. That's this town." She gave me a sympathetic look. The kind people give when they think you're deluded but too fragile to be told. Back in my room, I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. I opened Google Maps, typed in Maple Lane, then 174 Maple Lane, then just zoomed in manually around the area I remembered. Nothing. No Maple Lane. No streets nearby that looked even close. Frustrated, I took a photo of the picture to post in an online forum for local history, hoping someone else remembered the street. But when I checked the image in my gallery, my heart dropped. The house was gone. The digital photo showed me in the same pose, red crown, smile, cake tray. But behind me, a wide open field. No house, no porch, No mailbox. Just an overgrown expanse with tufts of grass and wild weeds. The same field I had seen earlier that day. It was like the house had been erased. Not just physically, but retroactively. Like the moment I tried to bring it into the digital world, reality reasserted itself. I tried again. Took another photo. Then a scan. Then a video. Each time, the house refused to appear. Eventually, I held the physical photo in one hand and the digital version in the other. Two realities. One with a house, one without. And only I could see both. I stayed up the entire night, staring at the two versions. By morning, the physical photo had begun to fade. The edges curled slightly, and the colors drained faintly. The more I tried to prove it existed, the more it seemed to vanish. What terrified me the most wasn't the disappearance of the house. It was the sudden, creeping thought that I might be next. Story 3. The Woman at the Window. By the next morning, sleep had abandoned me. My mind was a whirlpool of faded photographs, erased landmarks, and questions that had no business being asked, not unless I was ready to question everything I knew about memory, time, and even existence itself. But something inside me refused to stop. A pull, almost magnetic, urged me to go back to the field again. I told myself it was for closure, to see things one more time, maybe take notes or photos. But deep down, I think I was hoping to feel something. Anything that proved my past wasn't just a fabrication of my mind. So I returned to where my childhood home once stood. The air felt different that morning, heavier, stiller. The kind of silence that seems to muffle even your thoughts. The sun was high, but the shadows were strange, stretched out in impossible angles, like they didn't belong to the objects casting them. I wandered the perimeter of the field, tracing where the property line should have been. I remembered the creak of the porch steps, the hum of cicadas in the summer, the way the old oak tree leaned just slightly to the left. But it was all gone, every inch of it, until I saw her. A figure, about 50 feet away, just past a cluster of trees. She stood perfectly still, her dress fluttering softly in the breeze. A faded, sky blue dress, just like the one Miss Claire used to wear when I was a kid. I blinked hard. Was it really her? Miss Claire lived next door to us. She was the warm, soft-spoken woman who baked oatmeal cookies and left her windows open so the smell would drift over to our house. She'd wave at me from her kitchen window every morning on my way to school. But this woman hadn't aged a day. Same honey blonde curls pulled into a loose bun. Same gentle eyes. Same soft posture. Time had not touched her. Not even a wrinkle. Not a single strand of gray. "Miss Claire," I called out cautiously. She didn't answer. Didn't even flinch. Instead, she turned, slowly, almost mechanically, and walked behind a tall oak tree. I hurried after her, the grass crunching beneath my boots. I turned the corner behind the tree, but she was gone. Just gone. I spun in circles, checked behind every tree, scanned the horizon. No movement. No footprints. No broken branches. It was like she had evaporated into thin air. For several minutes I just stood there, heart racing, trying to decide whether I had hallucinated her, or if something far stranger had just happened. Eventually, I made my way back into town. Something had shifted in me. Not just disbelief now, dread, and I needed answers. I wandered into a dusty old antique store near the edge of Main Street. The place looked like a time capsule from the 1960s. Faded posters, shelves lined with porcelain figurines, yellowed postcards. The owner, an elderly man with Coke bottle glasses, nodded at me but didn't speak. I asked if he had any old newspapers or town archives. Back shelf. Wooden crate, he said, barely glancing up from his book. I sifted through the stack of newspapers, careful not to tear the brittle pages. Most were mundane. Town fairs, high school football scores, garden contests. Then I saw the headline that made my blood run cold. House fire on Maple Lane claims life of local woman. July 3, 1995. I froze. That was my 9th birthday. I unfolded the paper and read the full article. Claire Jennings, age 47, perished in an early morning blaze that destroyed her home on Maple Lane. Investigators believe the fire was caused by faulty wiring in the kitchen. Neighbors reported smelling smoke around 3:20 a.m., but were unable to reach her in time. Ms. Jennings lived alone. She was well loved in the community and known for her kindness, especially to neighborhood children. The obituary was accompanied by a black and white photo. It was her, the woman in the blue dress. The same woman I'd just seen in the field. The same woman who hadn't aged a day in 3 decades. I stood there for a long time, staring at the photograph, trying to breathe. If Miss Claire died in 1995, who or what did I see this morning? And why did she appear exactly where my house should have been? Story 4. The Duplicate Memory. Weeks had passed since I returned from the town that had swallowed my past. I hadn't told many people about what I'd experienced, partly because I didn't want to sound insane, and partly because I wasn't sure I trusted the memories myself anymore. But there was one person who had to remember. My older brother, Tom. We were close as kids, partners in crime, always riding bikes, building forts, catching fireflies in the backyard. If my memories were real, then Tom would remember them too. He had to. So one rainy Saturday afternoon, I drove to his house and brought the old photo album with me. I didn't say much on the drive over. I just kept playing the same thought in my head. If Tom remembers, I'm not crazy. If he remembers, then all of this is real. He greeted me at the door, towel around his neck, clearly in the middle of doing chores. Hey man. What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost. I might have, I replied flatly. We sat down in the living room. The rain tapped gently on the windows, and the smell of brewing coffee filled the air. Tom leaned back into the couch with that casual older brother energy I'd always known. I took a breath. I went back, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Back where? To our old town, where we grew up. He smiled. Oh yeah? How was it? That's the thing, I said. It's not there. The house. The street. It's all gone. Completely erased. Like it never existed. Tom's smile faded, replaced by confusion. I don't follow, he said. Maple Lane. The White House. You used to ride your red bike in the cul-de-sac. Dad had that garden with the rose bushes in the front. I turned 9 there. Remember? His face went blank. Not in a dramatic, shocked way, more like the mental equivalent of a page not loading. Jamie, he said slowly, we never lived in a house. I blinked. What? We grew up in a third-floor apartment, off Lincoln Street. You remember the tiny kitchen? That awful green carpet. Mom used to hang your school drawings on the fridge. No, I said. That was after. We moved there after the fire. After Claire. Claire who? Miss Claire, I said, my voice shaking now. Our neighbor. She used to bake cookies. Lived next door in the blue house. She died in a fire. Tom stood up and rubbed his face, pacing a bit. Jamie, you sound like you've been dreaming this stuff. We never lived in a house. Mom and Dad never owned property. We always rented. Always. I remember every place we lived, and none of them had front yards or cul-de-sacs. I reached into my bag with trembling hands and pulled out the photo, the one from my 9th birthday, with the house in the background. I handed it to him. Look, I said. This is real. Tom took the photo and studied it silently. I watched as the color drained from his face. He stared at the image for a long time, mouth slightly open, eyes narrowing as if trying to resolve a visual illusion. That's me, he whispered. That's definitely me. That's your birthday crown. I remember the cake. I remember the shirt I'm wearing. Then he paused. But I don't remember this house. I don't remember this place. He looked up at me like I had handed him a picture of a life he had never lived. I swear to God, Jamie, I don't remember ever being there. Not even for a day. I leaned forward, voice urgent. But if you remember the cake, the shirt, the moment, then where did it happen? Where's the rest of that memory? He shook his head slowly, backing away. It's like, I remember the feeling, the birthday, the people. But the background's gone. Like someone took scissors and cut it out. He handed the photo back with trembling hands. Then he said something that unsettled me more than anything else that had happened so far. You ever think that maybe we live there in a version of reality that doesn't exist anymore? I didn't answer. I couldn't. He wouldn't talk about it again. Every time I brought it up in the following days, he shut it down, changed the subject, pretended he was too busy. It was like he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to, and his mind was now trying to protect him from it. But I knew what I saw, what we lived. The photo was proof, and yet, somehow, it wasn't enough. Because what use is a memory when no one else remembers it? Or worse, when it comes from a world that was quietly deleted. Story 5. The Call from the Past. It had been a week since my talk with Tom, or rather, the collapse of that conversation into silence and denial. I hadn't tried to bring it up again. The fear in his eyes was enough to tell me that whatever I was unlocking, it wasn't meant to be understood. But the questions kept eating away at me. Every night I stared at the photograph, half expecting it to fade completely or change again. It didn't, but the air around it felt wrong, like it carried static, like it was fighting to stay in this reality. Sometimes I'd leave it face down, only to find it flipped upright by morning. Then came the call. It was just after 2 a.m. I was lying in bed, eyes wide open, mind wandering through memory fragments that no longer had a home. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with an unknown number and a faintly familiar area code, one I hadn't seen in over a decade. I stared at it, heart suddenly racing. Something in my gut told me not to answer, but my hands moved anyway. I picked up. Hello? There was a long silence. Then a voice, calm and delicate, came through the line. Jamie? I froze. I knew that voice. Soft, gentle, laced with concern and warmth. It was my mother's voice. But my mother had been dead for 13 years. Mom? Yes. But listen to me, she said quickly. We don't have much time. I sat upright, my chest tightening. My blood felt like ice. You're not supposed to remember, she continued. The house. The street. Us being there. It wasn't part of the design. We were misplaced. That's why they erased it. That's why no one remembers. My throat went dry. Who are they? I asked, nearly whispering. The architects, she said, or programmers, or whatever you want to call them. This version of reality, it has limits, rules, and we broke them. Somehow, we slipped into a place we weren't coded for. The White House was never meant to be. We weren't supposed to live that life. There was static on the line, sharp and high-pitched. The voice distorted, almost robotic for a second, then snapped back. You're breaching containment, Jamie. The memories you're chasing, they're cracks. The more you dig, the more they'll come for you. My hands trembled. Are you really my mom? The voice softened. I was, in that timeline, but not anymore. That version of me was overwritten, just like the house, just like Maple Lane. Tears welled in my eyes. What do I do? More static. Then her final words. Stop looking, or you'll go next. And the line went dead. I stared at the screen. The call wasn't logged. No number. No timestamp. Just a blank space where the call had never happened. Panicking, I tried calling back, only to be met with a message. This number is not in service. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, something else was gone. The photo album. The leather-bound book that had traveled with me, the one that held my only remaining fragments of that other life, vanished. Not misplaced, not stolen, simply gone, as if it had never existed. I checked every drawer, every shelf, every bag, nothing. Even stranger, when I opened the Photos app on my phone, all the pictures I'd taken of the house, of the physical photo, of the location, had turned black. Not deleted, just blank, as if the data had been scrambled, as if the images had lost their anchors to time and space. I tried to restore them from backup. There was no backup. Since that night, I haven't talked to anyone about it. Not Tom. Not my friends. Not my therapist. Some days, I try to convince myself that I dreamed it all, that grief warped my memories, that nostalgia twisted truth. But then, in quiet moments, I catch a flicker, a whisper of something not meant to be remembered. A scent of roses that shouldn't be there. A brief image of the porch swing in my mind's eye. A child's laugh in a cul-de-sac that no longer exists. And I wonder, not if I'm losing my mind, but if I was ever meant to have it to begin with. Story 6. The toy that shouldn't exist. I wish I could say that returning to my apartment brought me peace, that being back in familiar surroundings made the confusion fade. But nothing felt normal anymore. Not the hum of my fridge. Not the photos on my wall. Not even the way my shadow fell across the floor. It was as if the glitch I'd encountered hadn't stayed behind in that field. It had followed me home. I unpacked slowly that night, my body moving on autopilot while my mind spiraled. My fingers trembled as I reached for a duffel bag that had been sitting in my closet for years. The old green one I used in high school sports. I had no memory of packing it for the trip. In fact, I could have sworn I hadn't touched it in over a decade. Curious, I unzipped it. Inside was a single item. A small, wooden horse. About the size of my palm. Hand-carved. Worn from years of love and use. Its legs were slightly uneven, and the tail was chipped. I had chewed on it as a kid. The details were unmistakable. The little red streak painted on its saddle. The initials JM scratched onto the underside in my clumsy 6-year-old handwriting. It was my toy. The one I had lost as a child. The one my parents told me had fallen into the fireplace and burned. I remember crying for hours that day. I remember the soot-stained corner of the hearth. I remember my mother holding me and promising we'd get another one, even though we never did. So how is it here? In a bag I hadn't touched in over 10 years? I picked it up slowly, afraid it might crumble. It was solid. Real. Cold from years of storage. The weight of it in my hand sent an electric jolt down my spine, like the universe was reminding me, "You are not supposed to have this." A mixture of awe and dread crept in. I had to know. I pulled out my phone and called my dad. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy. "Jamie, everything all right?" "Dad," I said, barely able to get the words out. "Do you remember that wooden horse I used to have? The one I always carried around." There was a pause, a long one. "I don't think so," he said slowly. My stomach twisted. "What? You and Mom told me it burned in the fireplace when I was 6. You told me that." Another pause. Then, "We never bought you a toy like that, Jamie." I blinked, heart pounding. "Dad, come on. You carved it yourself, remember? You said it was based on one you had as a kid." He chuckled uneasily. "That's not ringing any bells. Are you sure you're not thinking of something from a movie or a dream?" "I engraved my initials in it," I snapped. "It's in my hands right now." The line went silent again. "Jamie," he said finally, voice low, "are you feeling okay? Maybe you should get some rest. You sound not like yourself." Before I could respond, the call dropped. No static, no error message. Just a cold, sudden end, like someone had severed the connection. I stared at the screen in disbelief, then back at the toy. But the toy was gone. I hadn't moved. I hadn't looked away, but the weight was gone from my hand. I looked into the duffel bag again, and this time there was nothing inside but a fine layer of gray ash. I touched it with my fingers. Still warm. That's when I noticed the smell. That faint, unmistakable scent of charred wood and smoke, lingering in the air, curling around my clothes, crawling into my lungs like a memory I didn't ask for. I stumbled back, heart thudding, mouth dry. The toy hadn't returned. It had glitched in. Then it had been corrected. Scrubbed from the code, just like the house, just like the street, just like everything I had tried so hard to prove existed. I sat on the floor for hours in the dark, listening to the soft ticking of the wall clock. The only sound that reminded me time was still moving forward. And I realized something horrifying. It's not just places that can be erased. It's objects. It's memories. It's proof. And maybe one day, it'll be me. Story 7. The Duplicate Stranger. A week had passed since the toy, or what was left of it, vanished in front of me. I hadn't told anyone. There was no point. Every time I tried to share the truth, reality seemed to twist tighter around itself, erasing evidence, rewriting memories, gaslighting me with clean precision. So I left town. Not permanently, just a break. I took the train 3 hours out to a different city, hoping that movement would help clear my head. That putting space between myself and the vanishing fragments of my childhood might keep me tethered to something real. It was a gray morning, heavy with cloud. I found myself sitting at a quiet bus stop on the edge of the city, waiting for a connection that was running late. The streets were empty, the wind cool. The kind of morning that feels like it's waiting for something to happen. That's when I heard it. A soft, low humming, a melody drifting beside me on the bench. Familiar. So familiar it made the hairs on my arms stand up. I turned my head slowly. The man beside me looked to be in his late 20s. Neatly dressed, earbuds tucked into his collar, but not in his ears. He was humming absent-mindedly, legs crossed, looking at nothing in particular. But the tune, it couldn't be coincidence. It was the same lullaby my mother used to hum to me as a child. It wasn't a popular song. It didn't have lyrics. Just a gentle, looping tune passed down. She once told me from her mother. I hadn't heard it in decades, not since before she passed. I leaned toward him cautiously. "Excuse me," I said. "That song, where'd you learn it?" He looked at me, surprised at first. Then he smiled, a soft, nostalgic smile, the kind you get when remembering warm kitchens and blanket forts. "My mom used to hum it to me before bed," he said, "back when we lived on Maple Lane." My heart stopped. I tried to keep my face still. "Maple Lane?" I repeated. He nodded. "I used to live there too," I said quietly. "White house. Red mailbox. Big oak tree in the yard." His smile faded instantly. He tilted his head slightly, as if studying me more carefully. "No," he said, "you didn't." I blinked. "What?" I remember every kid who lived on that street. There weren't many of us. Just 5 houses. We played together all the time. I would have remembered you. I stared at him, caught between confusion and something colder. Maybe we lived there at different times. He shook his head slowly. "We were there until the fire. After that, they knocked it all down." Now I felt a chill run through me. "What fire?" I asked. But he didn't answer. He stood up abruptly, brushed his pants, and said, "Take care of yourself." Then he walked away, not hurried, not angry. Just like someone who had said too much. I sat in stunned silence for a few moments. And then I saw it. Something glinting on the bench where he'd been sitting. I picked it up. Photograph. Old, slightly bent at the corners. Probably forgotten when he stood up. I turned it over. The breath caught in my throat. It was a picture of a boy, the man, as a child, standing in front of my house. The exact white house from my 9th birthday. Porch swing. Rose bushes. Even the red mailbox in the frame. He looked maybe 6 or 7 years old, smiling, happy. I flipped the photo over. On the back, in childlike handwriting, Me and Mom, Maple Lane, 1995. I sat there for a long time, unable to move. What were the chances that two people, complete strangers, had the same house, the same street, the same song, the same memory? Unless we weren't strangers at all. Unless we had both lived the same life. But only one of us was allowed to remember it. Story 8. The Looping Dream. Sleep had become a dangerous thing. After everything, the house, the missing toy, the stranger at the bus stop, my nights had grown restless. But eventually, exhaustion won. And that's when the dreams began. They started the same way each night. I would find myself standing outside our old house, the white one on Maple Lane. It was always dusk. The porch light flickered gently, and the windows glowed with the warm, golden hue of a home preparing for dinner. Everything was intact, down to the rusty mailbox, the creaky porch swing, and the rose bushes Dad used to complain about trimming. In the dream, I walked through the front door. Inside, my mother stirred a pot on the stove. The smell of her chicken stew, the kind with thick dumplings, filled the air. My father was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table, glasses slipping down his nose. My brother Tom sat on the floor nearby, pencil in hand, scribbling into his homework notebook like he always did when he was trying to finish before cartoons came on. It was perfect. Too perfect. But no one noticed me. I stood in the center of the room, tried calling their names. No response. I waved, shouted, cried. I even grabbed my mother's arm once, but my hand passed through like smoke. And then I'd wake up, heart pounding, shirt soaked. This happened again the next night. And the next. Every time, the same dream, same dinner, same unreachable family, playing out some pre-recorded memory. By the fourth night, I couldn't take it anymore. In the dream, I stood in the kitchen and screamed, "I'm still alive. I'm here. Why can't you see me?" That's when it changed. My mother paused her stirring. Very slowly, she turned her head. Her face was calm. Too calm. She looked me straight in the eyes for the first time and whispered something that chilled me to my bones. "You weren't supposed to come back." Then, everything went black. No jolting wake-up, no slow fade-out. Just nothing. I woke up gasping, my heart thundering in my chest. The room was dark, but it wasn't quiet. There was a faint buzzing, like static electricity dancing along the walls. I sat up and grabbed my phone. It was exactly 3:17 a.m. A notification was waiting from my Notes app. That's when the real horror set in. I hadn't opened Notes in weeks. Hadn't touched it. But there it was. A new file, created at 3:17 a.m. while I was dreaming. The file was titled Fragments 4.0. I opened it. There was only one line. "You are stuck in the wrong version." That's it. No sender. No metadata trail. Just those 7 words. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. The dream had already been terrifying, but this was different. This wasn't just memory. This was communication. From where or whom? I didn't know. But one thing was clear. Whatever I was remembering, whatever life I had once lived, it wasn't just a dream or nostalgia or some trauma-twisted echo. It was real. And I had somehow crossed back into it. or maybe dragged it back with me. I didn't sleep again for days. Not because I was afraid of nightmares, but because I feared waking up and finding more messages. Story 9. The Time-Slip Neighbor. After everything that had happened, the dreams, the vanishing objects, the photo, the call from beyond, I was unraveling. I wasn't just confused anymore. I was terrified. It felt like reality was fraying around the edges, and I was the only one who could see the threads coming loose. In that desperation, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Sarah. She was our next-door neighbor growing up. We used to race our bikes down the cul-de-sac, build pillow forts in her garage, and swap comic books under the big oak tree between our yards. If anyone could confirm that the house, and my life in it, had been real, it would be her. I found her on Facebook. She hadn't posted in years, but her profile was still active. I sent her a message. It was short, almost pleading. "Hey Sarah, it's Jamie. Something strange has been happening. I need to ask you something about our old neighborhood. Please. Just coffee." Just once. To my surprise, she responded within the hour. "Okay, I've been waiting for you to reach out." That reply stuck with me. Waiting? I didn't understand what she meant, but I didn't press. We agreed to meet at a small cafe near the edge of town, neutral ground. When I saw her, she looked older than I remembered, but familiar. Her hair was shorter, her expression more reserved. She smiled politely but didn't reach for a hug. We sat down. I ordered black coffee. She didn't order anything. I wasted no time. "Sarah," I said, "do you remember our house? The white one on Maple Lane? Porch swing? Red mailbox?" Her eyes clouded. She stared at her hands. Then she said, softly, "Jamie, I don't know how to say this." Something in her tone made my skin go cold. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone, opening a saved file from her gallery. A screenshot. An old, grainy newspaper clipping. She turned the phone toward me. The headline read, "House Fire Kills Family of 3, Maple Lane, 1996. I froze. My eyes scanned the article. The words were sharp and surreal. In a tragic early morning fire, the Jennings family, Richard, Elaine, and their 9-year-old son Jamie, were pronounced dead after their Maple Lane home went up in flames. Firefighters arrived too late to rescue the victims. There it was. My name, my parents' names, our address. My entire family declared dead in 1996. "But that's not possible," I stammered. "I lived there until 2001. We moved after I started high school. I remember everything." Sarah's face was pale. She was visibly trembling now. "I remember the fire, Jamie," she said. "I remember the smell. I remember the sirens. I remember crying for days. We were 8. You were gone." I shook my head, my heart slamming against my ribs. No, that can't be. "I'm here. I'm right here." She looked at me then, not with confusion or sympathy, but with fear. Real, wide-eyed fear. "Then who are you?" she whispered. My mouth went dry. Before I could respond, she grabbed her bag and stood up. "I shouldn't have come," she said. "This was a mistake." "Sarah, wait." But she was already gone, disappearing through the door into the street, leaving me there, alone, with a truth I didn't know how to hold. The article was still glowing on the phone screen. I reached across the table to screenshot it on her abandoned phone, but it locked. I tried to wake the screen. Gone. The article had vanished, just like everything else. Story 10. The security footage. By now, I'd given up trying to explain my story to others. People either couldn't remember or wouldn't. Evidence vanished. Memories collapsed. Photos changed, and still, some part of me needed to know. Even if the truth shattered me. Even if I didn't survive it. So I turned to cold, official data, records, archives, cameras. Machines don't forget the way people do. I visited City Hall under the pretense of historical research. I requested access to Maple Lane property records, and, more importantly, any archived traffic surveillance footage from around 2000 to 2010. The clerk didn't ask questions. He led me into a backroom lined with file boxes and old tech equipment. After a while, he handed me a battered external hard drive with a yellowing label. District 3. Traffic cameras of 4B. Maple Lane. Archive 2003-2008. I took it home, not knowing what I'd find. Not knowing if I'd find anything at all. That night, I plugged the drive into my laptop. It whirred slowly to life, coughing up folders of outdated video files, grainy, silent, time-stamped by ancient software. I opened the first clip, April 17, 2005. The camera was perched on a streetlight pole facing the entrance of Maple Lane. The footage played in dull, washed-out tones. The trees swayed. A few cars passed. Children biked in lazy circles on the cul-de-sac. And then I saw myself. There I was, 10 years old, unmistakable. Same haircut, same red t-shirt with the superhero logo. I was riding my red bike down the street just like I used to. My breath caught in my throat. I leaned in, watching closely. Frame after frame, I pedaled happily, my younger self weaving through the cracks in the pavement. And then, in one frame, I glitched. That's the only word I can use for it. My body flickered. Just for a split second, a jagged distortion. A blur of broken pixels where my head should have been. My limbs bent in unnatural angles, like a corrupted 3D model in a video game. And then, gah! The next frame, my bike hit the pavement and skidded forward riderless. I wasn't there. No impact, no crash, no fall. No one screamed. I simply ceased to exist, mid-frame. The other kids kept playing. No one looked over. No one noticed. As if my disappearance hadn't happened. As if I'd never been there. I rewound it. Watched it again. Same glitch. Same blink. Same eerie absence. I exported the clip, tried to save it. But the moment I renamed the file, my laptop froze. The screen glitched. The folder disappeared. Gone. I checked the hard drive. Now empty. Everything, all the archived clips, vanished, leaving behind only a corrupt directory and a single unreadable file labeled Error 174 orphaned MCOV. I tried opening it. Nothing. My system crashed. When I rebooted, the drive was no longer recognized. But I remember. I remember watching myself disappear. And I realized something terrifying. That may have been the real version of me, the one who was supposed to vanish that day. So who or what has been walking around since then? Me? Or some leftover code? Some misplaced version of a child who was erased, but slipped through the cracks?